Hi, I'm Karuna. I'm the founder and executive director of Mind Oasis, and this is a new weekly series that we're calling Meditation Happy Hour, Tea, Talk, and Truth with Karuna. And I'm here with Kelly Lindsey, one of my most favorite people on earth, for our inaugural session. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, Karuna.
How are you?
I am okay.
Good. Good. I'm happy to hear you be honest, because that's what we're going to do today. Is we're going to talk about honestly how things are going. And so one of the things I thought we could start out with before we even introduce you is to ask you a little bit about what your day so far has looked like.
That's a wonderful question. So I woke up at 5:30 this morning to the sound of my 2-year-old Jack, which is a sweet, sweet sound most of the time. We got up and we started our day. He has a routine of watching a television show while Adam and I shower and get ready for work. We had breakfast, and then I came to work. I use my workspace as my meditation space because I have 3 children at home, and so uninterrupted space and time is kind of hard to come by in the home environment. So I sit in my meditation space here at work to start my day. Then I went to therapy, my own therapy with my therapist. And then I came back to my office and saw clients as a therapist and spent the rest of my day until meeting with you, seeing clients and helping them to navigate the turbulence of this world. So I say okay because the knee-jerk reaction is say, I'm great, how are you? But the truth is I'm holding a lot. And so there's a lot of feelings that are finding me today and every day. And it's our work, I think, to navigate those and to help each other.
Yeah, wonderful. Before we go into who you are and all of the wonderful things you have to share, my day is very similar. My day started at about 5:30, and I usually teach a Thursday morning class. And at 6:50, I discovered that my internet had dropped. I live in the mountains. No internet means actually no phone either. So I had to hop in my car and drive to the closest place where I could get a signal to let my students know that indeed class had been canceled. Along the way, I stepped in snow. So I had cold feet, wet feet, no class, etc. So my day too already has felt very full, and my meditation practice on Thursdays happens in the evening. So thanks for showing up and keeping it true and real. So let's hear about you. Where are you and what are you up to in this world?
So I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a therapist in private practice, which I shared already. I'm a meditation teacher. I teach on the Mind Oasis and also locally here in Austin at a studio called Dharma Yoga. And together with my husband, I run a company called Dakini Meditative, which is was designed to support people in establishing and maintaining a meditation practice through offering meditation classes and retreats and meditation cushions, which I make.
Wonderful. So the idea behind Meditation Happy Hour is that on Mind Oasis, we talk a lot about this being real people, real lives, real talk. And even the teachers, we come to each session with myriad experience. You're raising children still. I have a 23-year-old son. All of the beautiful things that come with partnership and work and a practice. In other words, we're not in a cave. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about the current, let's say, atmosphere of what we face between health and finances and what feels like a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's my perspective that the current atmosphere is actually not any different truly from any previous or past atmosphere. The Buddha, when upon his awakening underneath the Bodhi tree, taught the Four Noble Truths, or had the realization of a teaching that he ended up giving that we know as the Four Noble Truths or the 4 Arya Truths. And the first is that life is suffering. And there's lots of ways to describe that, but one of the ways that many of us are experiencing suffering right now is in through feelings of overwhelm or anxiety, through navigating, as I said earlier, just kind of the inevitable turbulence of life. And we all experience that in different ways, but there does seem to be kind of a collective experience of suffering that's unique to this moment and yet somehow not different from any other moments. It's just how it's manifesting now.
I'm pretty active on social media. I try to keep my posts to being helpful, but I bet I spend an hour between different, various sites, mostly maybe on Facebook. And what I'm noticing is a lot of people are really worried and maybe don't have the perspective of the Buddha's teachings and the Four Noble Truths. And I'd love for you to maybe just run through what those are. But I wonder if you have, from your years of experience between being a meditation teacher, studying Buddhism, and then also being a therapist, if there's anything in particular that could be a touchstone for folks who really are concerned.
Well, I think the first thing is just to validate people's concerns, right? Like, it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel worried. We have a virus going around that's threatening the health and the well-being of many, many humans right now. Our financial markets are totally in crisis, and many people's sense of financial stability has really been threatened. There's bigger things going on, like climate change and war and the political systems that we're experiencing right now, and all the different reactions that we have to that. So I think the first thing is just to validate people's concerns. We live in concerning times, right? And if you're not feeling a little bit anxious or worried, you're probably not paying attention. So initially, there's nothing wrong with the feelings of kind of being anxious or worried or even afraid. Like, those are just genuine human feelings, and they are inevitable, right? And if we are experiencing them, it means because we're paying attention and we have the capacity to feel. Mm-hmm. And so that's in alignment with what the Buddha taught. The first noble truth is suffering. He said, secondly, there's a reason why we suffer, right? Thirdly, there is an end to suffering. And the fourth is that there's a path to end suffering. And the path to ending suffering has everything to do with how we meet the reality that we're experiencing and the emotions that arise in us as a result. And for me, meditation practice and the path of studying Buddhism has been kind of a guiding light in terms of how I meet the reality of my experience and how I help others do the same.
And so maybe can you talk a little bit, since it's hard to ever put ourselves in other people's feet. I mean, we can do it from perhaps an empathetic perspective of trying to imagine what it would be like. But from your own personal experience in this time, or maybe even a time where you felt more anxiety, what are some of the tools, or maybe how do you meet that with a little bit of grace?
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of the description of my day gives you insight into how I choose to do that on a pretty regular basis. The first is meditation practice, and the second is therapy. Those are two really core things that I do on a daily or weekly basis to help me navigate that. The rest of my day, if I were to look ahead, will involve, after we wrap up here, picking up my daughter from school and meeting up with my husband and my son and taking a long walk around the lake where we live and spending time in nature, which is another way that I help myself to kind of ground and stabilize. And it really, all of those things have to do with grounding and stabilizing, right? Grounding into the present moment, stabilizing my attention so that I can meet the emotions that are showing up with more presence and compassion. And there are specific meditation practices that I use in my own daily practice and that I also share with others, which I feel like are really helpful. For example, in meeting anxiety and fear and overwhelm, the practice of Maitri meditation or loving kindness is a really, really beautiful antidote.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? It's something I use as well. It's something, interestingly, I don't go to a talk therapist very frequently right now, but my acupuncturist sort of serves as both. And when I was experiencing and pretty significant anxiety this year, where I would get heart palpitations, um, in addition to her helping me with acupuncture, she really encouraged me to use loving kindness meditation as a way to almost um, move that energy from my heart and use it. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what loving kindness meditation looks like for you.
Yeah. When I think about loving kindness meditation, the first words that come to my mind are heart medicine. And
Oh,
if I think about the feelings that are finding me recently of just maybe a little bit of anxiety or overwhelm, a little bit of depression, um, just kind of sadness and meeting so much of maybe not even my own suffering, but also the suffering of people that I love and care about. Loving kindness practice feels like heart medicine. And it's a way of meeting ourselves and meeting each other in a way that holds our experience in what Buddhist teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called the cradle of loving kindness. And it's kind of a resting place. If we think about whatever we're experiencing, if we know that somebody cares about that, if we know that somebody cares about us in the midst of that, there is an ease or a softening or a relaxation that becomes possible.
wonderful. Is it a practice that you would want to share? Maybe just the basics of the practice with us here?
Well, maybe we can do, maybe I can just tell you a little bit more about the practice, and then maybe we can just do an abbreviated practice, something that the formal practice is a little bit long, and a beautiful thing to do, but sometimes it's also nice to just do a shorter practice as a way of kind of extending loving kindness to ourselves or others on the spot and meeting whatever's arising in the moment. So traditionally, the practice of loving kindness has 5 parts, and it begins with extending loving kindness to ourselves, using particular words or phrases that communicate the feeling of loving kindness, and different teachers use different words. I also really encourage students to find the words that actually help them to meet what it is that they most need to hear in the moment. So the words that I typically use are, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be peaceful, and may I live with ease. But then I always leave a little bit of space there to just sense, like, what is actually present in my experience, and what is it that I need to hear, or what is it that I need to know, and to offer that to myself as a gesture of loving kindness. And then from there, having kind of opened and cared for our own hearts in whatever vulnerability and realness there is then we can extend that to other people. But the practice has to start with us, right? We can't offer kindness to another person. I have mixed feelings about this. I think we actually can offer kindness to another person. I think we do it all the time. Many of us are very kind to others, and sometimes or often not so kind to ourselves. But I think in order for that kindness, there's just more resource available to us when we start with ourselves. And then from there, we extend loving kindness to a loved one, somebody that's really kind of natural and easy for us to open our hearts to, somebody that we genuinely wish for their happiness and their health and their well-being. And then the practice continues with extending loving kindness to a stranger, somebody that we know very well, somebody that we don't have strong feelings about one way or the other. And then the 4th stage is to extend loving kindness to somebody who's difficult or challenging for us. Maybe somebody who's extended harm to us or has created harm in the environment around us. We don't have to start with the biggest person, but we could. And that, we kind of ease into that part of the practice because it can bring up a lot of feelings and big feelings and difficult feelings. But usually at that point in the practice, there's enough of that stability and the feeling of loving kindness that it becomes easier to extend it to someone even who we feel really challenged by or not in alignment with. And then the 5th part of the practice is to extend loving kindness to all beings, because the reality is that we are all worthy and deserving of happiness, of health, of ease, of peace, right? There isn't anybody on this earth who isn't deserving, who isn't worthy of experiencing those things.
What do you say when people challenge you on that last part?
I would say just because we don't feel like just because we don't feel like someone is deserving doesn't mean that they aren't. And if we encounter those places, those sticking points within ourselves, it just shows us where our work is. And it's okay for us to be where we are. We do not have to force it, right? This is not a practice of forcing ourselves to feel any one particular way. And we don't even have to like the person or agree with the person in order to extend loving kindness for them. It is not a prerequisite. You can feel however you feel about them, right? And you can even feel that they're unworthy or undeserving. But there isn't a single human being who isn't worthy and deserving of love and kindness and compassion. And so when we meet those places within ourselves, it really just shows us where our work is, and it's not a cause to beat ourselves up or give ourselves a hard time or think that we're hard-hearted, or it's just honoring where we are. And from that place, for those of us who are interested in doing this work, seeking the opportunities to grow and expand. But there's no forcing. You can't force loving kindness, but you can be willing.
Yeah, good. So you mentioned loving kindness is one of the tools that you use. Do you have any other tools that you have in your toolbox these days? Yeah.
Yeah, lots of them. Lots of them. I feel like some of the ones that I am utilizing quite often right now are acceptance of self, acceptance of others, acceptance of life as it is, acceptance of really big challenging things, which are not so easy to accept. Like for me, living with chronic physical pain, that's kind of been at a lifetime high level in recent months, and very challenging to deal with and to live with, and very challenging to accept. But I find that the more that I can bring acceptance to myself and the experience, the more I soften and the more I can create the space that I need for healing. And so, one of the ways that I extend acceptance to myself in a moment is just to take a few breaths and to feel however I'm feeling physically, energetically, emotionally. Place my hand on my heart or some other place on my body, maybe a place that's experiencing pain, and just say, this is my experience right now, and it's okay. And just those words of it's okay, like even just hearing them now, I can just take a little bit of a deeper breath and feel some of the tension and the tightness that I have that, is resisting my experience, begins to soften and open up.
Yeah.
Another tool that I've been using frequently recently is the practice of forgiveness. Forgiving myself when I feel like I'm not enough or I'm not showing up as well as I'd like to. Forgiving others. Asking for forgiveness. Those are really the three aspects of forgiveness: forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, and then asking for forgiveness from someone else. We all make mistakes. We are all human. I really do believe we are all doing the best that we can. Sometimes it's genuinely not good enough. And when we fall short, we have to have a way of moving forward. And I think forgiveness gives us the opportunity to keep moving forward instead of being bogged down by guilt or shame or resentment. It offers us the opportunity to keep going.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, Kelly, you have so many tools, and you've, through your trainings, through Dakini, through Mind Oasis, those of us who've been meditating with you for a long time, we've been so fortunate to receive so many different tools at our disposal. Some folks who will watch this, they might not have a meditation practice yet. And so it occurs to me that maybe it would be helpful just to talk a little bit about your journey to meditation, or your journey in meditation as a point of inspiration.
Well, my journey to meditation was really precipitated by a lot of suffering. And for me, it was particularly suffering in the form of losing, tragically, people that I loved and experiencing a deep, deep grief, which turned into depression. And this kind of out of that space of depression, this longing to understand why we're here, why we suffer, what we can do about it. And that led me to discover yoga and then meditation and then finally Buddhism. And I don't think that's an uncommon experience. I think people often come to discover some kind of spiritual practice or path because they're suffering in some way. And our suffering is all going to look different. It's going to be uniquely ours. But recognizing that there is some sense of shared humanity, like we're all in this together. We all are going through something. Life is not easy for anyone, at least for very long, no matter what it looks like from the outside. It's kind of built into our human experience. And there will always be people who are suffering more than us or less than us or suffering in a different way from us. So comparison is never helpful, but the recognition that we all do suffer and that it's okay, that it doesn't mean there's something wrong with us or that we've done something wrong. But I think that often is what causes people to come to want to seek out a practice or a path. And for me, the practice of meditation has been the foundation of working with that. And the path of Buddhism has been a way of kind of understanding those deeper questions, which I think are the questions of kind of any spiritual seeker. The question might vary a little bit, but it has a lot to do with why are we here? What's the meaning of life? How do we meet suffering? How can we be of service to the world around us? And so the path of Buddhism has really spoken to me very directly and offered me guidance that felt trustworthy and authentic and aligned with kind of my own deepest understandings.
And when you decided to embark on your meditation adventure, which I love, I feel like it's almost always connected somehow with yoga. It was for me as well, and at Dharma Yoga. Did you go to an app and learn from an app, or did you learn from a book? Who the heck taught you how to meditate, lady?
Oh, honey, I want to say, just making myself sound a little bit older. There were no cell phones. There were no computers. There were no personal computers. There were no cell phones. There were definitely no apps. And there weren't even yoga studios when I started practicing, which is really, really interesting. And so we are in this really amazing time where literally there's access to spiritual guidance and teachings and practices at our fingertips. It's such a remarkable, remarkable time. And it's so extraordinary to me to see the blossoming of that and to see the genuine interest and then also just the accessibility. You know, it's just become so much easier. And even, you know, it was much harder 25 years ago when I started thinking about, you know, the teachers of, you know, the lineage of the Buddha, like going back hundreds or even thousands of years. You know, the difficulty in accessing teachings was so much greater. And so the fact that it becomes easier and easier with each passing day just feels like such a magical, auspicious thing and such a beautiful occurrence. So there's so much out there. So for somebody who's starting, I like to think of meditation teachers as like ice cream flavors.
I love it.
Very silly personal philosophy, but
I think it's fantastic.
Are there different flavors? But there's, you know, ice cream that's made with dairy milk or coconut milk or almond milk or rice milk, or and there's infinite flavors and variations and toppings. And I feel like all the flavors, with some exceptions, I'll be honest, there are some inauthentic teachers and traditions out there, but generally speaking, there's a lot of really good-hearted, genuine teachers who are available at the touch of a button. And they are all just like flavors of ice cream. And there's no one flavor that's better than any other. There's just the one that's your favorite. And so for people who are starting out, I like to say, just go try all the flavors. You know, don't make the mistake of staying in that space forever. like Chogyam Trungpa called that like spiritual shopping, or shopping the spiritual marketplace. And you could kind of get caught in this almost hungry ghost mindset of like never kind of getting enough. But I think initially it's a really wise thing to listen to different teachers, download different apps, check out different communities, and see what resonates for you, because we each have a place in us that is trustworthy. And the role of a teacher or teaching is simply to allow us greater access to the places of wisdom within us.
I love it. So tapping into that intuitive spirit, that all-knowing within, I think it's something many of us struggle with, but it seems smart in this time that we have to develop a relationship with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It occurred to me today when I was kind of prepping for chatting with you about this, that there may be a unique opportunity with the sort of repercussions of the coronavirus. And I don't want to take away from the seriousness of what we're facing at all. I think we all can recognize that part. But we are being asked, and my guess is we will be asked more and more so, to not be out in the world unless we have to be. One example, actually, your husband gave me last night was, whereas you might have gone to the grocery store at the drop of a dime because you wanted to go get your, coconut yogurt, maybe curbside makes sense. Or maybe only going once a week. If curbside isn't an option, you only go once a week and you make sure you get everything you need. You don't do those many trips because that just means you're exposed to more people, right? So many of us that meditate, we engage in personal retreat, where we actually kind of cloister and get quiet and reflective for a period of time before we go back out into the world. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, around the opportunity that this could be some sort of small or large reset in our own personal life.
Absolutely. Just before we hopped on the call, I got a text message from my oldest son, who's a senior at Texas State University, letting me know that they just extended spring break to be 2 weeks long instead of 1 week long. And my thought was like, how wonderful, like you actually need a break, and we don't often give ourselves a break. And I've been kind of feeling to myself, many of you have probably seen the meme going around of, telling people to stay home. And then the introvert's like, yes, I've been waiting for this my whole life. There was a part of me that's like, if I had the opportunity to stay home for 2 or 3 weeks with my family in a really intentional, kind of quiet, simple way, that would feel like a blessing. And the anxiety and the overwhelm that I was speaking to as we open, just personally, oftentimes arises just because there's so much to do. There's so many things that need to be attended to. There's so many places we need to go, the grocery store being just one of many. And I think the opportunity here is, I actually see a few opportunities. The first is to become more intentional about our movements through life. Right? What are we doing and why are we doing it? Right? What is the most important thing right now? And taking the opportunity to actually slow down, to pay greater attention, and to take the time and the space that we need for ourselves. I think it could be a huge, huge opportunity to reset, as you said, and to restore. Because I don't know anybody who's not feeling some version of too much, right? Just a lot, everything just feels like it's too much at times. Too much of what? It depends on the person, right? Too much news, too much activity, too much work, whatever it is. It's just a feeling of too much. So it's an invitation to slow down and to simplify and to become really intentional and to pay attention. Which is this beautiful dance that meditation teaches us, of how to kind of combine our attention and awareness with this sense of intentionality. Like, what are we doing here and why? And then the other thing I think is really being provided is the opportunity to really protect and honor life, which is a foundational principle in the Buddhist teachings. We are being asked, like, even if we're not concerned for ourselves and our own health and well-being, to be attentive and aware about the impacts of our movements on other people and other people's health and well-being. And I think really at the heart of this, in terms of thinking about coronavirus as kind of a public health crisis, like I just read yesterday that Colorado, in addition to many other states, has kind of called a state of emergency. And for many people, life is going on, as normal. They don't really feel personally or directly affected by it yet. But there is this call to really look at the ways that we can protect and honor life, our own lives, our families' lives, and the lives of everyone. And in doing so, I think we'll be a healthier and happier world.
One other thing, just quickly, I'd love to hear a little perspective on was something else that occurred to me. One of the basic principles of Buddhism is the idea of interdependence, or what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, that you can take, I've done it before, a roll of toilet paper, interestingly, in this day and age when it's scarce, a roll of toilet paper, and you can see from the sunshine to the paper to the truck drivers and everybody in between how just one roll of toilet paper can offer us the opportunity to see our interdependence. And I just wonder if anything has come up for you around how our actions, how maybe that's not a concept everyone is familiar with, but again, that this particular outbreak of corona is almost presenting us the opportunity to get real clear on that.
Well, if you look at the maps, I can't remember who has the best map, but Adam was telling me that he's been watching a map. Do you know which one it is?
Yeah, Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins University has a map mapping out the movement of coronavirus. And it's really fascinating to watch. And I just heard a story yesterday of some cases on the East Coast where they were able to just specifically track from person to person and town to town, like different cases. And I think the same thing is true in Colorado. Almost all the cases in Colorado are spread out across the state, like single individuals in different places, with just like a minor interaction that transferred the virus and then they took it somewhere else. And so there's this invisible connection that we have with each other that is being made visible. And there are infinite other ways that we can experience that connection, but that is certainly true. And feeling into that, like the actions that we take might not be solely for the benefit of ourselves, but we're all being really asked to consider the impact of our lives, our actions, our movements on other people. And the reason for that is because we are all so profoundly interconnected and our actions do matter.
Big time. And so just coming full circle as we start to wrap up here, it occurs to me that in the loving kindness meditation that sometimes there's the little added flavor of feeling your own heart mind space. And then as you begin to move your attention out to other people, that you imagine their heart space as well, and then the ability to connect. And it feels like that would be a very, almost like an antidote to a virus which is causing harm, using that interconnectedness to, again, to transform, transmute into a different type of connection.
Well, one of the interesting things about coronavirus is for most people, it is not a life-threatening illness. For some people it is, but for most people it's not. And so it's possible that the positive implications of this crisis will far outweigh the harm that's caused by the virus itself, right? Like the actions that we take, the things that we're learning, the mindfulness that we're bringing to simple things like hand washing and going to the grocery store, might actually have such a powerful and positive implication for the future, that far outweighs, the negative of coronavirus. It's really interesting to think about.
It is. It is. It gives a little flavor of hope. I think hope is important when things can feel a little hopeless. I haven't looked at our stocks for a really good reason, but I remember in 2008, I think it was, my grandma went from being financially secure to being really financially insecure pretty much overnight. And because she was, older, that she never experienced the ability to recover from that. So for a lot of us right now, it's a scary time. So I think anytime we can bring practices, tools, a little bit of hope, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of that interbeing to the world, it's a good thing, and it's a needed thing.
Yeah, and that brings up an important point, I think, to really respect and honor other people's feelings. Whatever they're feeling. I think I've seen a lot of people feeling really afraid, and then other people telling them that they shouldn't feel afraid, that it's no big deal. And there's just a lot of invalidation of people's fears and concerns, and the impact of whether it's coronavirus or the crash in the financial markets as a result of coronavirus. I think it's really important for us to not discount our own feelings and not discount the feelings of other people, because our experience is valid. And one of the things that I've really come to believe, that instead of feelings being an obstacle to greater peace or to greater freedom or to more compassion, that our feelings are actually the gateway. Our feelings are actually the gateway to greater peace, to greater compassion. But we have to learn how to feel them, and we have to learn how to navigate them. And we won't be able to feel them fully or navigate them effectively if we're continually discounting them or invalidating them, whether they're our own or another person's. And I think many of us can feel, probably in our own experience, ways in which in our paths our feelings have been invalidated, and then we're less willing to show up and share how we feel. And I think that I would really like to see the world overcome that. Like, if we could just hold each other and ourselves with a gesture of acceptance and compassion and kindness, and just honor that each of us is feeling exactly what we need to be feeling. And if we can allow ourselves and each other to feel it, it'll actually illuminate the path forward.
Very cool. I'm hearing an Austin bird in your background.
Yeah.
It's lovely. So I would be remiss if we didn't mention that you have an upcoming series on Mind Oasis. Do you want to talk just for a second about what it's about, and maybe if it connects with anything else you've been talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of thinking in terms of tools in the toolbox, the course that I'll be offering after spring break will be on a Buddhist teaching called the Six Perfections. The Buddha taught the six perfections, these six what are called paramitas, as six qualities that can help us to navigate that space in between suffering and freedom from suffering, in between the first noble truth and the third noble truth. It is one way of talking about the path to alleviating suffering for ourselves and others. And the six qualities that we'll be working to understand and to cultivate are generosity, kindness, patience, joy, meditation, and wisdom. And I really can't think of a time in life where one of those qualities, if not all of them, wouldn't be relevant or helpful. And it's one of my favorite teachings that I keep coming back to again and again.
Absolutely. Very cool. I think it's the 24th of March. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure if that's a Tuesday mornings. And then I'll just say that we also, anyone who signs up for a class, you also get access to community meditation. And we offer over 100 classes each month, where you can just drop in each day for a 30-minute meditation session. If you're new to meditation, it can be a wonderful way to kind of get your bearings, understand what the heck to do, understand what not to do. You're not trying to empty your mind. So we dispel myths from the very start. And if you have an established practice, I like to say you can come and show up for other people, because when we meditate in a group, beyond the accountability and the fun, which is all true, we're also really showing up for other people. It can be a wonderful gesture of generosity to be there in community with other people.
Thanks for making it possible for us to be in community in a way that is really honoring our sense of personal health and well-being right now.
Yeah, at this moment, the social distancing is built in, so hallelujah to that. Awesome, Kelly. Anything else you want to add before we wrap her up?
I don't think so. Thank you for this lovely afternoon tea, and to everybody who took the time to listen. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, so you can find Kelly at dakinimeditative.com. She has offerings live down in Austin, and she teaches online with Mind Oasis, and she sells lots of beautiful meditation cushions. I have many. This is just one. And we love you, Kel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karuna. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.